Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Jacques. I'm with the GTL Center at American Institutes for Research. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our webinar, Are You Ready for Teacher Leadership? Tools and Strategies for Putting Your Ideas into Action. We have a packed agenda today, so please know we'll be sharing the slide deck and the webinar recording about a week after the webinar with everybody who registered and on the GTL website. If there are any questions at the end that we don't have time to get to, we'll also make sure to include the answers to those in a document along with the webinar slides. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the GTL Center, we're a federally funded, comprehensive center that supports states and regions in their efforts to support great teachers and leaders. If you're not familiar with the GTL Center, please do check us out at our website, gtlcenter.org. So you're all here today because you're interested in teacher leadership. Teacher leadership has become a major focus of a lot of different education initiatives in the past few years, in part because it has a lot of support from teachers themselves, but also because it has a lot of potential benefits. So today we're going to talk about understanding teacher leadership, assessing readiness for teacher leadership, and we're going to hear from our presenters about their teacher leadership initiatives. So today we're hoping that we can build a shared understanding about teacher leadership in terms of its design, its approach, its purpose and impact, plus the research literature and the readiness factors for teacher leadership. We'll also be introducing some new readiness tools and, of course, learning about those teacher leadership initiatives that are currently happening across the country. So to kick us off, I want to just share a little bit about our current understanding of teacher leadership. So right now, we define teacher leadership fairly generally. Experienced teachers become teacher leaders when they assume responsibilities outside of their classroom that contribute to instructional, policy, or organizational research. One of the challenges around teacher leadership is that it's been used as a catch-all term before. Sometimes it's described active classroom teachers who have engaged in teacher leadership activities and former teachers who've moved on to administrative, policy, or advocacy roles. As we've been learning more about teacher leadership over the last couple of years, it's become clear that part of the challenge with defining it is really whether somebody can be a teacher leadership if they aren't still an active classroom teacher. So while it's clear that there are a lot of classroom teachers who are also teacher leaders, there are some teacher leadership roles that have emerged that don't include direct instruction of students. They're not purely administrative, though. Instead, some of these roles are around expert teacher leaders supporting teachers in non-instructional responsibilities. So things like lesson planning, assessment, data analysis. So today, we really see a spectrum of teacher leadership roles, including full-time classroom teachers that are engaged in special initiatives, part-time classroom teachers who also have part-time leadership responsibilities. Sometimes we see interventionists who work with student caseloads and have part-time teacher leadership responsibilities, and some of those full-time teacher leaders. So who gets to be a teacher leader? We have not necessarily had a clear or consistent way of talking about this in the past. We've heard it be said that all teachers can be teacher leaders, or sometimes only very specific teachers can be teacher leaders. We would argue that it's both, but in a more specific way. So it's true that all teachers can be teacher leaders when they have opportunities to collaborate on special initiatives or on school-level teams. So, for example, National Teach to Lead initiative allows any and all teachers to think about what are the needs of their schools and students, what do they need to be successful, and the Teach to Lead initiative supports them in designing and launching local programs, local structures, local initiatives to help to address those. The Maryland Peer Coaching Model and the Wisconsin Teacher Voice and Leadership Project, which we're going to hear a little bit more about today, also both share this approach of empowering all teachers to be engaged in teacher leadership. There are other formal teacher leadership programs that have really focused on how experienced, exemplary teachers can take on very official teacher leadership roles. So things like mentoring, support for new or less effective teachers, also providing guidance and leadership. So we look at the Denver Public Schools Teacher Leadership and Collaboration Model. That's a really good example of this kind of approach. And actually, we'll hear a little bit about how they're using that model at Hamilton Middle School from one of our presenters today. So what's the purpose of teacher leadership? When we look at the innovative models around the country, we see some really clear trends emerging. So, of course, many organizations have advocated for teacher leadership through voice in policy and decision making because it can help those policies and local programs be more effective and designed with real classroom conditions and challenges in mind. Teacher leadership has also often been used to help retain effective teachers. We've heard from many effective teachers that they want more career pathways and more growth opportunities, even as they maintain some instructional responsibilities. They want to be able to teach and have a meaningful and professional career trajectory. The most common way that we've seen teacher leadership been used, though, is as a vehicle for instructional improvement. So we've seen a lot of teacher leader roles focus on mentoring and coaching, but also around things like general teaching support, sharing content expertise, helping to build conditions for learning, or helping to create new and innovative and helpful school and district structures. It's really important, and this is, I think, the foundation of our webinar today, for the states, districts, schools, and individuals that are really interested in teacher leadership to consider their readiness for these types of roles and work to foster the conditions that facilitate success for teacher leadership. Different roles might require slightly different responsibilities and skills, but overall the shifts and the types of skills needed for most types of teacher leadership roles are actually the same. We have a couple examples here, but we would also encourage you all to check out some of the standards and competencies that have been developed by other organizations. NSTOI has teacher leadership standards. The National Board has developed teacher leadership competencies. So check those out if you're interested in learning more about those, as well as the self-assessment skills tools that we're going to discuss in a couple of minutes. So we know that teacher leadership can be a big change, and that's not just for teachers. Sometimes that's also for administrators and district leaders and sometimes even state leaders that are fostering these sorts of initiatives. So we want to consider not just readiness for the teachers who are moving into these teacher leadership roles, but also how school and district leaders can help to support and foster these kinds of programs and opportunities. So before we jump into these tools, the GTL Center has a number of resources on teacher leadership available, and we want to share a few of those. The Good to Great study is something that has focused a lot on teacher leadership. We're going to be coming out with a third report in that study series in a couple of weeks, so please keep your eyes out for that. We also have a forthcoming professional learning module on how to use teacher leadership as a strategy for school turnaround. So also keep your eyes out for that. I think that'll be really interesting. The REL Midwest also led a webinar last year on some of the research and policies that we've seen around teacher leadership. So if you're interested in learning more about teacher leadership historically, that's a really good resource to check out. And so with that, I'm going to turn everything over to Liz Barkowski. She's a senior researcher here at AIR, and she's going to talk about our self-assessment tools. Liz?
Hi, everyone. This is Liz Barkowski. As Catherine mentioned, I'm a senior researcher at AIR, and I'm located in our Austin, Texas office, where we're very lucky today to have sunny skies and weather in the 60s. So apologize to everyone on the East Coast getting snow in the Midwest. So this last spring and summer, I had the opportunity to work with the Regional Education Lab Midwest, which is run by AIR, to work with one of the research alliances under REL Midwest to develop 2 tools that were intended to help assess readiness for teacher leadership. Now, teacher leadership and educator effectiveness have been topics that REL Midwest has been working on for a few years. So I'll first here give a little overview of the RELs and the REL work, and then I'll dive into the process we went through to develop these tools. So the Regional Education Lab, REL Midwest is one of a network of 10 labs funded by the U.S. Department of Education's Institute for Educational Sciences. Each REL serves a designated region of the country, which you can see here on the map, and the RELs focus on national priority areas in education to help states and school districts use data and analysis to address important policy and practice issues with the goal of ultimately improving student outcomes. So the RELs work with what we call research alliances, which are comprised of State Department staff, school district staff, higher ed staff, professional association representatives, and other stakeholders in the state. And the alliances form around different topic or priority areas that are our policy priorities within the states and the region. And in REL Midwest, we had an Educator Effectiveness Research Alliance, which decided to focus specifically on teacher leadership this last year, since many Midwest states in the region have embarked on or were planning to embark upon large-scale teacher leadership initiatives and wanted some support from the RELs. And in conversations with our alliance members, the members felt that as a state department, as school district staff, one of the best ways they could support their educators was to produce these two tools that could help support the leadership initiatives that were being implemented at the state and at the district level. So to begin the work, REL Midwest first conducted a literature review on teacher leadership to first identify what does the research say about teacher leadership. And very big picture summary of that research, our team found very little empirical research on teacher leadership to identify the outcomes or impacts of teacher leadership. A lot of the existing research focused on inputs or processes, conditions, attributes, rather than those outcomes. And I wanted to point out two research studies that we reviewed, among others. There was a 2004 literature review on teacher leadership by York, Barr, and Duke, which is a very seminal piece, and a more recent 2016 literature review by Wenner and Campbell, and you can pretty easily access these both online. And these two studies, despite more than a decade between them, from 2004 to 2016, both found really little definition around teacher leader roles, responsibilities, and outcomes. They did, in fact, however, highlight a lot of the knowledge, skills, competencies, and supports needed for teacher leadership, which I'll discuss here in a moment. So I'd also like to point out that although there's been interest in teacher leadership for a long time, even earlier than 2004, of course, most of what we might learn about the specific impact of teacher leadership and what's in the research currently comes from literature on specific interventions that are led by teacher leaders, such as instructional coaching or cultural competency initiatives. More recently, there are a lot of new teacher leadership initiatives that have come out, and some current research, such as the GTL Center Good to Great series that Catherine mentioned earlier. There's an evaluation of the Iowa Teacher Leadership and Compensation Program. There's an evaluation of the Denver Public Schools Teacher Leadership Initiative that we'll hear more about in a moment. And the NN Story also has a really insightful report called Creating Sustainable Teacher Career Pathways, which also provides a great synthesis on teacher leader roles. So to dive into a little more about what we do know from the literature about teacher leadership, we categorize what we know into these three big buckets. First, the literature does in fact outline what teacher leaders do, and that would include examples such as mentoring and coaching of other teachers, providing or leading professional development, supporting other school leaders to handle administrative tasks, and contributing to school and community in a variety of ways, such as leading school-wide initiatives. The literature also includes a lot of information on the skills and competencies needed to serve in teacher leadership roles, such as having, of course, being a strong teacher, and having the ability to lead others, having some of those leadership skills, fostering trust and building relationships among colleagues, teaching adult learners, and mediating conflict. And then finally, the literature does in fact include a lot of information on conditions that influence teacher leadership, such as school culture and context, roles and relationships between the leaders themselves, the leaders and other teachers, and the leaders and other school leaders, and also school structures and ways in which the school day is designed, such as scheduling and configurations. We also found some information on factors that both support and inhibit teacher leadership in our review of the literature. If you can go to the next slide. First, we found factors that support teacher leadership, including training and support for those teacher leaders, strong support from administration, school culture and climate, and as I mentioned, some of those more logistical structures, and clear communication and understanding related to the teacher leader roles and responsibilities themselves. We also identified in the literature some factors that can inhibit teacher leadership or inhibit the success of teacher leaders in their roles, such as lack of time to fulfill leadership responsibilities, poor relationships with peers and school administration, school culture and climate factors such as having a lack of a growth mindset that might inhibit teachers from taking the support, feedback, and coaching provided by teacher leaders into account. And then also personal characteristics of the teacher leader, such as lack of leadership skills or lack of confidence. So we reviewed all this literature, identified, again, those skills, competencies, knowledge, systems, and supports for teacher leadership, and used all of that information that was research-based to develop 2 tools to support teacher leadership. Also, I'm sorry. So the tools that we decided on, I'll talk here a little bit more about the process that we went through to develop those tools, but the 2 tools that we came up with were a teacher self-assessment tool and a school and district leader readiness tool. The teacher self-assessment tool, again, built using that literature and also incorporating a ton of feedback from our stakeholder advisory group, which was comprised of members within the REL Midwest Research Alliance, including teachers, district leaders, instructional coaches, and others. We use that literature to develop these 2 tools. Both of the tools include different domains of competencies and areas for support. They also include indicators or subdomains and indicators within each of those, and I'll show you an example here toward the end of my piece of the presentation of what those tools look like. Both of the tools also include rating categories, so the intent is that a teacher, for example, whether they're a new teacher, someone who's been in the field for a number of years looking to advance into a teacher leader role, or someone who's in a teacher leader role themselves and wants to grow in that role, the intent is that anyone, regardless of the point at which they are in their career, can use this tool to self-assess their competencies, knowledges, and skills in these 4 primary domains. And the tools, again, can be used either individually or with a coach, a colleague, a mentor, a school leader, to take the information gathered and be able to put together a plan on how to advance to reaching that advancing level on the tool. The school and district leader readiness tool was intended for leaders at the school level, the district level, or even in conjunction with one another to assess culture and context, roles and responsibilities, and systems and structures that can support and foster teacher leadership. And you'll see that the school and district leader readiness tool also includes 4 domains, including not evident, beginning, partially in place, and already in place, so that those leaders can assess where they are currently with their systems and structures to identify if they have the systems, structures, culture, et cetera, in place to be able to support and foster teacher leadership. So we went through a process with the stakeholder advisory group within the REL Midwest Educator Effectiveness Alliance to develop these tools. So first, I mentioned earlier, we conducted the literature scan last spring, and then we used that literature to develop a first draft of the 2 tools. We then worked very closely with our stakeholder advisory group members to obtain their feedback on the tools, not only the content, but also the format, structure, the rating categories, and suggested instructions or information to provide to those who will be using the tool on how to best use those tools and get the most out of them. Once we had a pretty solid draft of those 2 tools, we conducted cognitive interviews with teachers and school and district leaders to obtain really specific feedback on the content and the wording of these tools to ensure that it was very clear, comprehensive, and that it was understandable by the people who we intended who would be using those tools. We finalized those tools within the REL Midwest back in October, and we are extremely happy to have worked more recently with REL Midwest to publish those tools more widely. So next I'd like to show just a brief example of what the tools look like. And there's a link on the next slide that we'll see here in a moment that does give a link to each of the 2 tools. And I believe the webinar handouts also include copies of the 2 tools. So if we could go back to the screenshot of the beginning of the district and school leader tool, you can see, as I mentioned earlier, that this tool includes 3 major domains of content: culture and context, roles and responsibilities, systems and structures. And then you can see that each domain includes a subdomain. Within culture and context, for example, we have vision for teacher leadership, professional culture and collaborative inquiry, and collaborative shared leadership. Within each of those subdomains, there are a variety of indicators and also look-fors or examples of what that might look like in practice. So within each indicator, similar to a teacher or principal observation rubric, there's a statement as to what being ready or what being able to support and foster teacher leadership might look like under each of those indicators. And then again, those look-fors provide some examples, which are not intended to be all-inclusive, but provide some examples of how you might characterize the level of readiness within that domain and subdomain. Now, within the tools, again, I mentioned the rating category earlier, and there's a rating, 4 ratings within the district and school leader tool, and a brief description of each rating. So, for example, not evident would mean that the school or district does not exhibit elements of that indicator, leading to already in place, indicating that the school or district has most, if not all, of the elements in place to support and foster teacher leadership. And also, those elements have been proven effective, and the district and school will continually review and improve those elements. So you can see that there's a range of different, I guess, readiness factors that a school or district might exhibit within each domain. And the way the tool is structured, again, is that you can kind of click or indicate which rating you would assign either your school or your district within each category, and then the language of the indicators and the look-for should provide some indication as to what that highest level already in place would look like and provide some benchmark to strive toward. I'll make one additional comment here that again, with those look-fors, we really encourage members within the REL Southwest Alliance to customize those look-fors and make them very specific to their own school or district. So this is definitely a tool that we would encourage you to take and customize to make it best fit your context. So again, here are the links to the tools, and here's my contact information on the next slide. So if you do have any questions about the development or the content of the tools, I'd be happy to answer those here at the end of the webinar or through email. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz. So this is Catherine Jacques again. I really appreciate that. I'm really excited about these tools. I hope that you all are as well. You can check them out on the website using those links. For those who may have joined the webinar a couple minutes late, I just also want to note again that the slides will be available along with the webinar recording in about a week. We'll email them to all of the registered participants. So if you're wondering if you can get a copy of this information or trying to figure out how, where those links are. Don't worry, that will all be available to you. Also, if you have any questions that pop up, please feel free to put them in the chat box. We'll be looking for questions that come through and gathering answers that we'll address at the end of the webinar. And so with that, we'd like to talk a little bit about some current teacher leadership initiatives. And with that, I will turn things over to our presenters from Hamilton Middle School.
Hello everybody from Denver, where we are looking out of our window at the beautiful Rocky Mountains. I am Christian Sawyer, proud principal of Hamilton Middle School in Denver Public Schools, and I am honored to be joined by two colleagues here at Hamilton, Leslie Meyer and Whitney Bradley, who will each share a little bit about themselves.
Hi, my name is Leslie Meyer. I've been teaching in Denver Public Schools for almost 20 years, and all of those years have been at my wonderful school, Hamilton Middle School, and this is my first year as a teacher leader.
Hey everybody, this is Whitney Bradley. I am the Assistant Principal of Teaching and Learning at Hamilton Middle School. I was a classroom teacher for 5 years, and I spent 2 years as a teacher leader, and this is my first year as an Assistant Principal, and it's my first year in Denver.
With that, we thought we would share some opening background on teacher leadership. I, as principal here, have been on a journey learning about the power of teacher leadership, and I've had several really influential moments in understanding the impact of this paradigm shift. In my first principalship in Nashville, Tennessee, I went into a school that had a very traditional design with one principal, 2 assistant principals, and about 40 different teachers and educators on the team. And as we looked at the needs of our school and the vision and deep belief that we had in it, there was a profound moment in my work when Dr. Barbara Stengel, who is a professor at Vanderbilt University, said to me, you know, Christian, teaching is a team sport. We need to rethink the equation. And so together with Barb and with a whole group of people, we partnered together to look at how we could tap into a team design rather than the one teacher, one classroom model. Barb said, let's tap into the dynamics of different roles and perspectives to collectively advance a child's learning and change the odds. Coupled with that, I had been working in my district or in our cluster of schools with this group out of North Carolina called Public Impact that really was looking at how teacher leadership could reach our millennial era generation of teachers to create a pathway to influence, to create a culture of shared lift and teacher leadership. That really came together in my journey to look at how we could reframe teachers as moving beyond coaches and into actual school leadership positions while remaining in the classroom and in their work in instruction as teachers. The second chapter of my work led me to Denver Public Schools. And what was so powerful in Denver was this idea that the entire district is anchored in a core philosophy of teacher leadership. The entire budget and all of our curricular decisions are aligned around this belief in the efficacy of teacher leadership. I mean, even in my interview, I knew when the instructional superintendent directly talked to me about her beliefs in teacher leadership, that struck me that the entire belief system in our district honors that teacher leadership is the key lever for advancing equity for all students. So this led to the development of our model here at Hamilton Middle School, which is on the next slide. In our current model, we have, and this is based upon a lot of the work in Denver Public Schools, we have role differentiation. As you can see, we have a circular model. It is not hierarchical, where we believe in the power of the team to come around the student. The scholars are at the center of our model. In our current model, there is the team lead role, and the team lead's key functions are around our strategic instructional systems. So we work around those systems, and the team leads lead weekly collaborative planning with their team teachers, weekly data teams, weekly observation and feedback, and lead professional development. If you notice, the first and most important key function is that our teacher leaders, our team leads, still teach classes. And that is a very critical part of our belief, because our teacher leaders are every day in the work, working with students, planning lessons, and that is a key piece in their then informed leadership with their fellow teachers. We also have a secondary role, which is known as the team specialist role. And what is unique about this is that, similar to the earlier influences I mentioned, the opportunity culture idea, the team sport concept coming from Vanderbilt, the team specialist role is an opportunity pipeline for up-and-coming teacher leaders. So each team lead has a team specialist that they partner with. The team specialist teaches all day, but leads the weekly data teams, collaborative planning, and professional learning for their grade level, and therefore is being developed into deeper levels of work with teacher leadership and really creating that pipeline. If we could go to the next slide, please. So when we think about the key systems of support that we are working to really support teacher leaders, we think of the weekly instructional leadership team as a key ingredient because we come together as a team. All of the team leads come together, and the team specialists are included in the instructional leadership team, and we weekly shout out progress along our aligned goals. We use a consultancy protocol where our team leads network their shared problem solving around challenges they're facing as teacher leaders, around coaching and developing others. We watch, for example, videos of exemplar weekly data teams, and what's exciting is a lot of those videos are coming from inside of our teacher leaders' work inside of Hamilton as we network and learn from our differentiated skill set on the instructional leadership team. And as I mentioned, the team specialists are included in that weekly data team as we are developing that pipeline and gaining a lot as well from their perspective as full-time teachers. We also hold weekly one-on-ones with our team leads, our teacher leaders, because that critical communication helps us as school leaders listen to the needs of our teacher leaders and crush barriers they might be encountering, as well as coach and develop our team leads in support of their leadership. We also built out a summer institute, and Denver Public Schools has a series of workshops aligned to the strategic instructional systems, like weekly data teams, like coaching and feedback. So we have that central support as well. But an important part of that early learning in the teacher leaders transition and the launch of a model is, we have outstanding teachers in these roles who have gotten transformational results with their students. But transitioning into leading adults is a key early area of support many teacher leaders need. And that is the last bullet point, the co-observation and modeled feedback conferences. In the launch of our model, we really worked hard as school leaders to walk side by side with our teacher leaders and do those initial observations and feedback sessions with teachers to both calibrate on our observation framework, but also to support and learn from the teacher leaders in those discussions and grow as school leaders. And we thought that was instrumental in the launch of our model in a shared lift rather than an evaluation model that we didn't think would mean much to our teachers in the beginning. So across the timeline of our implementation, on the next slide, in order to get to where we are, we started with a year zero of really looking at what this would look like. And what I thought was very meaningful was how Hamilton and the teacher leaders helped design this model. We're instrumental in beginning conversations with the community about this, in redesigning the budget, and in recruiting people for these new roles. In our first year, which is this year, we, as I mentioned, have built out those instructional systems, and we have really looked at that shared launch with the teacher leaders who have been instrumental in helping us rethink things that were in the original vision. And next year we will evolve our teacher leadership roles to actually become senior team leads, where they will take on more of the roles of evaluation, more of the roles of in-depth conversations with our teachers. And also we're going to expand teacher leadership to include our arts programming and our music programming, which we think is really exciting and something that our community called for after experiencing the first year of teacher leadership. I am going to turn now the microphone to my colleague, Leslie Meyer, our teacher leader here for social studies.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. I wanted to talk to you about my journey in becoming a teacher leader. I first became interested in becoming a teacher leader several years ago when I was asked to join a committee which developed the teacher leader role for Denver Public Schools. As I worked on this committee, I saw that this was a wonderful program that I was truly interested in being a part of. I could stay connected to the classroom. I could continue to teach my students. And while I was doing this, I could also take on a leadership role, coaching, evaluating, and helping teachers with data analysis. When my school decided to build a teacher leadership model, my principal asked me to serve on the committee which wrote the plan. And the committee, along with my principal, worked together to create and submit a plan, and that is the plan under which we operate today. We have 6 team leads: math, language arts, social studies, science, English language development, and special education. We each teach 2 classes a day, and the rest of the day we're involved in our teacher leader role, coaching, evaluating, and working with data teaming. I've received some wonderful training from the district and from my school to prepare me for this role. This summer, before I started my role, I attended a week-long training provided by the district. I learned many things, and one of the things that stands out in my mind was how to coach by using the highest leveraging factor to get teachers to improve on their rigor, collaboration, and classroom management. I was also required to take classes on how to evaluate teachers using our LEAP framework, our evaluation framework, and that was followed by a test which I was required to pass before I was allowed to evaluate other teachers. One of the things that I think is so important that Denver Public Schools does is they're very intentional about making sure that all teachers are calibrated when evaluating and are doing an accurate job. At my school, I receive constant support from my school leaders who I can call or text anytime to receive whatever support I need. I can't begin to tell you how invaluable this is. In addition, we have weekly meetings with our school leaders and team leads where we discuss data teams and other issues which arise. And one of the favorite aspects of these meetings is when team leads discuss coaching problems and all of the team leads give advice as how to best solve that problem. I have found some very valuable answers in this conversation. We also have our one-to-one meetings with our school leaders where we discuss how school leaders can support team leads. And the first quarter of school, I had some wonderful training. I was closely observing teachers with my school leader, and we would evaluate and collaborate and calibrate together to make sure I was prepared to take on this role. As with anything new, there's always some things that you don't expect. One of the things that I found is that when you go into a teacher's classroom after having coached them for several months and you see big improvement, you feel like a proud parent. It's a wonderful feeling. Teachers with whom I've worked for the last 15 to 20 years, who I now coach and evaluate, on the other hand, had a bit of a period of adjustment. For all these years, they saw me as a fellow teacher and had to accept the fact that I was now their evaluator and coach. Also, teacher leaders who have been teaching as long as I have, 15 to 20 years, can have a bit of a struggle getting used to having teacher leaders who might be younger than them or perhaps not taught as many years. But of course, no matter how many years we all have been teaching, we can all learn and grow. All in all, it's really been a wonderful journey this year.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And now we will hear from Whitney Bradley, another colleague here at Hamilton, and our assistant principal of teaching and learning, who was, prior to this, a teacher leader.
Hi. So I want to start by talking about the teacher to teacher leader to school leader pipeline. So it's not easy to jump from being a teacher to a teacher leader or a teacher leader to a school leader, but it can be done. And what I want to talk about is the way in which principals and administrators can support teachers into teacher leadership and into school leadership so that there's a very strategic pipeline. The first thing that has to happen is capacity building. In order for me to be an effective leader, both content-wise and school-wide, my principal had to intentionally and strategically build capacity through prep work around difficult conversations, how to have them, what to do after you've had them, meaningful one-on-one meetings with which Leslie talked about, and also a strategic time for reflection and connection to prior learning. Sometimes in teacher leadership and even in school leadership, we make mistakes or we make missteps, and the ability to be able to reflect on those mistakes and missteps are paramount to growth and also to being able to help others. The next thing that has to happen, again, is those opportunities to grow and fall. I'll never forget one day I walked into Christian Sawyer's office as his teacher leader and said to him, "Dr. Sawyer, I am struggling with this teacher. I don't know what to do with her. What are we going to do?" And he looked me right in the face and said, "I don't know. What are you going to do?" And at that point, he empowered me to come up with solutions from my own leadership framework that would work for my teacher that I was coaching. Some of the things that I did with that teacher worked, others did not, but ultimately that teacher is now an effective and successful teacher in the Alabama public school systems. Connectedly, support from administration is the key aspect of a teacher leader and even a school leader being successful. Private disagreements are not made public. I knew that if there was something that Dr. Sawyer and I disagreed about, we could talk about it, we could come up with a solution, but in public, he was going to support me. There's a mutual trust and belief that I am competent in my role, both as a teacher leader and now as a school leader. I have to note that I was a teacher and then a teacher leader and now a school leader under Dr. Sawyer. It's important to note that because retention is a huge issue when it comes to teaching. Teachers burn out after 5 years, and I have to tell you that teacher leadership is a way to keep effective teachers around. Another aspect of support from administration comes from him telling me when I am not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. A part of teacher leadership is when you try something that doesn't work, someone being strong enough and bold enough to say, "That doesn't work, what else can we do?" Many times in our one-on-ones, it's not "this is what you're doing," but it's more "tell me what you're doing and how is it being effective." Finally, there has to be strategic communication, collaboration, and celebration. For communication, we have to have one-on-ones and ILT meetings. Teacher leaders and school leaders have to know that they are important and they are heard. We spend a lot of time problem solving, but we have to practice being reflective practitioners ourselves. Collaboration comes from shared learning experiences. You have to have a time for your teacher leaders to meet and to talk and to problem solve. I encourage all of you that have teacher leadership in your building or who are thinking about teacher leadership in your building, please don't only have one teacher leader. They need the support of others who are like-minded and who are also in their same role in order to bounce off ideas. They need a peer group and a constituency group. Also, with celebration, under Dr. Sawyer's leadership, I was Teacher of the Year for the Metro Nashville Public Schools and also the Middle Tennessee Teacher of the Year. I was up for Tennessee Teacher of the Year, and I know that came from having strong support from administration. By celebrating my role as a teacher leader, Dr. Sawyer opened up the door for other teacher leaders and for other teachers to want to be teacher leaders. As Ms. Meyer noted, because she is able to celebrate the successes of her teachers and teach her team specialists and other teachers what she does, it creates a pipeline, a positive pipeline that reverberates not just with one teacher, but throughout the building. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Sawyer.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bradley. At this point, I'm going to ask for my team to share main takeaways, and we'll start with Leslie Meyer.
Thank you, Dr. Sawyer. I think that my main takeaway is that this is the teaching model of the future. And the reason for this is because this is where relationships are formed between teachers and the evaluators and coaches. These positive relationships encourage teachers to grow and to try new ideas. No matter how many years a teacher has taught, a teacher can always learn new ideas and strategies for our students and their changing needs today. And instead of having the old-fashioned model of having a principal and a couple of assistant principals, and they come into your room and see you and evaluate you maybe once or twice a year, instead of seeing that and instead having a teacher leader who is in there all the time, working with you, helping with you. There can only be improvement in our education, and that, of course, is what we want for all of our children.
Thank you so much, Ms. Meyer. Ms. Bradley?
My takeaway is that in order to be a multiplier, you have to first be multiplied. With leadership, there has to be someone that models the way, but also models a way that is something you can replicate. Oftentimes we think of schools being person-driven as in a leader. However, what we know is that schools are purpose-driven. When you create a teacher leadership model, please make sure you give teacher leaders a rationale and a purpose for their leadership, because if not, it becomes unsustainable and it just becomes teachers telling other teachers what to do as opposed to teachers working with other teachers on a mission.
And in sitting here today, I wish to share that in order to get different results, we must do things differently. But let's look inside of our system of talent and draw out the solution by shifting our paradigm. If we begin with an inherent and overarching trust that the solution to more equitable outcomes for students comes from within the gold mine of teaching talent that we have right with us, we can move faster in our shared vision and mission. This is of national importance as we look at the power of teachers in retaining, developing, and recruiting this next generation as we move forward. And the proof in sitting here today is right before us with these two incredible educators and Ms. Meyer. And I'm sure that people can sense the team that we have here, because Ms. Meyer, a deeply experienced teacher, Ms. Bradley, a teacher who received who led transformational results with her students and her community, have each shifted the paradigm of even my role. You know, I deeply learn as a principal from these incredible educators, which has shifted the paradigm of the role of the principalship as being a shared learner, a shared leader with teachers, only made possible because of the core philosophy of a district who in Denver Public Schools aligns all the resources and direction around this shared belief in the power of our teachers, that together we see teaching and equitable outcomes as a team sport, as a team lift, all of which, though, relies on the central belief that teachers are school leaders. They are not stand-on-the-side coaches. Teachers are not in a hierarchy. They are actually the school leaders that can lead transformational outcomes for students. We believe this is the most vital work of our generation in education. Thank you for the honor of being able to present and share today the work that we are a part of.
Thank you so much, Principal Sawyer, Ms. Meyer, Ms. Bradley. It's really exciting to hear about all the amazing work you're doing. Thank you very much. We have a packed agenda, so we're going to move on to our next presenter. I'm going to hand the baton over to Amy to tell us about the work in Wisconsin.
Thank you, Catherine. I am Amy Trainer. I am an instructional coach at DeLong Middle School in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Prior to being an instructional coach, I was a mathematics educator for 16 years. I am also the 2013 Wisconsin Middle School Teacher of the Year, and I currently work in a partial capacity as a teacher leader at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. So I'm going to share with you kind of the Wisconsin journey just over the last year. So our journey for our Teacher Voice and Leadership project really started with attending a summit, the National Summit on Teacher Leadership, with our State Superintendent Tony Evers last year in Washington, D.C. In February, about this time of 2016. We really talked a lot as a state team about local decisions that have been made in Wisconsin, and especially decisions made in policy by lawmakers over the last 7 years that have really affected the amount of teacher voice that helped guide decisions, and really the impact of the lack of teacher voice and how that affected the classroom. Because of the lack of teacher voice in our state, we've seen less teacher autonomy in classroom decisions, which led to less creativity and innovation in the classroom. Teachers were really feeling demoralized, disrespected, devalued, and really wanted to focus on how can we rebuild that teacher voice and leadership in the state of Wisconsin. So we decided that we needed to create a structure to support, encourage, and just inspire our teachers to lead both in the classroom and at the state level. So we've started to focus on what our rationale for teacher voice and leadership would be. So we talked about why we felt as Wisconsin educators, why is teacher voice and leadership important? And we focused on a few key things. One, teacher voice and leadership is a critical support for improving instruction and student learning. The teachers are often the heart of successful schools because they are often best positioned to see challenges firsthand and craft effective solutions that help teachers address these challenges. We also talked about that effective schools and districts have a school climate that supports and encourages teacher voice and leadership. That teacher leadership has the power to transform instruction, student supports, and school culture, but only when dedicated principals and superintendents support, promote, and recognize leadership as an important lever for improving student learning. And then finally, behind schools and districts with strong culture of teacher leadership, there are principals and superintendents who work to support, but that schools that do not have the climate and culture in supporting teacher leadership, they really don't have to be left out. The teachers can help build this and build the climate and culture through their work. And this was really important and an important place that DPI felt like they could provide a supporting role in valuing that work. So again, just talking about what our Teacher Voice and Leadership project would positively impact. We really looked at, we know that teacher leadership is a powerful tool in lots of ways and that it can positively impact all of these things, attracting, recruiting, and retaining high-quality educators, really about the school culture and climate, educator collaboration, teacher autonomy, instructional practices, but really that all of those things lead to better student achievement. And when teachers are inspired to lead, teacher retention increases, school and district culture improves, and student achievement also increases. So we really wanted to, through our project, kind of re-inspire teachers. So we kind of have a tagline, be inspired, be empowered, be the change, and that's what has been the center of our Teacher Voice and Leadership project thus far. We talk a lot about wanting to empower educators to be proud that they are an educator and to be advocates for their students in their profession. And in Wisconsin, we've talked a lot about that each and every child deserves to have a teacher who has been empowered to lead. And we feel like teacher voice and leadership being a piece of that is how that's going to happen. And we had a hard time figuring out if we wanted to focus on teacher voice or teacher leadership, but really keeping teacher voice and leadership together because teachers lead in different ways. And we're thinking that in Wisconsin, we're going to more describe it instead of define it. That teacher leadership is not necessarily a defined role. It can be, but currently we're looking at it as that teachers lead at different levels. They lead in the classroom, they lead in the school district, and they also can lead at the state level. So the Department of Public Instruction is working to describe and strategically develop teacher voice and leadership as part of the cultural norms of being a Wisconsin educator. This including teachers, principals, and administrators when we use that term educator. Also, the highlighting exemplary models within the state to really elevate, promote, and grow teacher voice and leadership statewide. So kind of our journey or our timeline and team effort, we, like I said before, attended the National Summit on Teacher Leadership. And then from there we convened a leadership team, and this leadership team was really important for those of us that attended the National Summit to bring in all education associations across the state to really have a collective voice of what teacher voice and leadership looks like, feels like. And so the Department of Public Instruction, WEAC, which is our teachers union, ASA, which is our school administrators association, WASDA, which is our district administrators, and our school board association have all been a part of this from the initial the initial leadership team way back in June of last year. And then we expanded our leadership team to a larger working group to include additional teachers and school and district leaders in November of 2016 to truly make it an inclusive effort and to begin brainstorming ways to support, encourage, and inspire teacher voice, and also ways to celebrate the work that teachers do every day. So this working group team has really heightened DPI's collaboration with all education associations. Part of this is the convening of a Every Teacher a Leader Summit, which we're in the process of planning for this April of 2017. So our working group has decided to take on two different pathways. We really wanted a quick win for educators, and our first quick win is that Every Teacher a Leader Summit. It is modeled after a Teach to Lead Summit, and it will be powered by Teach to Lead. It is to create a space for Wisconsin teachers and educators and key partners to workshop, network, and really grow teacher leadership statewide. The plan is to grow teacher leaders from where they are, no matter where they are in the journey, with good ideas on how to improve school and learning, to be really ready to implement the projects that they're working on. There are examples all over the state of great teacher leadership opportunities, and Every Teacher and the Wisconsin Every Teacher a Leader Summit is about promoting, supporting, and growing the work to benefit our students. From the Every Teacher a Leader Summit, we are going to then use the summit participants as ambassadors for the profession and to continue to grow and hold this summit every year. So as well as working on the summit, we are working with the Department of Public Instruction to create a framework for teacher voice and leadership. And part of this framework we're working through right now, and we don't really want to over-define teacher voice and teacher leadership, and we want to more of describe it, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we continue. So currently the Every Teacher a Leader Summit is one of the projects that we're currently working on, and like I said before, it's a collaboration of multiple stakeholders, and because of that, it has allowed us to really work fast on this. We just started the planning back in December, so thankfully we have the support of all 5 of our educational associations. We also have the great support from Powered by Teach to Lead to help us move this work forward, and also the fabulous support from Midwest Comprehension Center and the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders. And without the collaborative effort, we would not be able to really move this summit to reality and have this quick win for our teachers across the state. The response has been amazing. One of the big takeaways is the educators across Wisconsin have lots of great ideas on how to improve teaching and learning at their schools. We got 50 applications in just a short window of time. We opened it up for about 3 weeks. And being the first summit being held of this kind, we were really excited to see all the great work that came through, the variety of different projects. But also teachers are coming from different schools with different types of climates, cultures, and challenges, and there's a lot of variation in project development and where they are on the journey of teacher leadership. We don't have many spots for the summit, so we worked with GTL to look carefully at the applications and consider which projects are really ready to move forward, including how clear was their idea and how engaging were they with other educators and stakeholders, and how they're going to look at building teacher leadership through their project idea. We're also hoping to partner with GTL to really plan some support for the rest of the teams. Because we had so many great applications, we want to be able to possibly support or give them some guidance and resources to fit their needs of where they are. And because this is our first annual summit, we're excited to see where this is going to go and how it's going to build over time. The other project that we're working on in our Teacher Voice and Leadership is the framework. And we're really in draft form on this. We're working through our framework, had a lot of great input from different stakeholders. It is an opportunity for us to really describe the Wisconsin version of what teacher voice and leadership looks like. And it's an opportunity for the state to take the lead on really describing, I guess would be a better word for what this looks like. It's a tool to empower local change, both in empowering that change, but also supporting local schools and school districts to make some of the changes that are needed. It is again working in collaboration with our teachers, principals, and superintendents that are on our working group for the Teacher Voice and Leadership Project. This tool will really be helpful to all educators in the state of Wisconsin interested in getting involved in teacher leadership. It will also help educators see additional opportunities and show that the state supports those opportunities. Our goal is to give descriptions. We created some goals, and we're going to give descriptions of what teacher voice and leadership looks like at the classroom level, at the school and district level, and also at the state level. So taking each of our goals and really breaking it down to what does that look like in each of those components. We really talked a lot about the risk of over-defining teacher voice and teacher leadership and wanting it to, again, make sure it's more of a descriptor. We also talked about, because we worked through the Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching in our educator effectiveness process, talked about aligning the teacher voice and leadership framework to work that's already taking place, and especially the Charlotte Danielson's domain 4, which is professional responsibilities, and how could we crosswalk that to show teachers that this is work that a lot of them are already doing, and to celebrate the successes in those areas. So just a few takeaways before I end today. One, how important that it was a collaborative effort, really engaging with all of our education associations so that we have a wide range of opinions and a wide variety of people at the table, so that they can really be succinct with, so we can really be succinct with our description of what teacher voice and leadership is at the state level. Another takeaway was really don't think too hard. We talked a lot about not over-defining teacher leadership. We talked about teacher voice versus teacher leadership, and really wanted to make sure that we incorporated both. And the Every Teacher Leadership Summit really defines what we're thinking about that, and that every teacher is a leader, whether it's in the classroom or it's at the state level. They're still a leader, either for their students, for their teachers, for their district. Part of our process we really helped define and put some structure around our framework was attending the CCSSO 2017 Teacher Leadership Convening, and there we saw what other states were doing, and it helped us to really clarify what we wanted to do. Especially when we were there, we were able to talk with a group from Kentucky to look at what their frameworks looked like. So not only is it a collaborative effort within our state with our educational associations, but we're really collaborating across states to really come to a consensus on what this looks like for us. And finally, just also recognizing where educators in Wisconsin have been over the last 7 years and where they are now, and seeing, especially in the applications for the summit, how much has come from teachers in this short time as far as their ideas and their passion, that it really does emphasize the need for us to listen to teachers rather than make it a top-down directive. And this really embodies the whole teacher voice and leadership approach, and really embodies the vision that Wisconsin sees for not only our teacher voice and leadership project, but both of the pieces of our project, which is the Every Teacher a Leader Summit and our framework that we're currently working through. So thank you so much for this opportunity to just talk through what we're working on in Wisconsin. It's very exciting and it's moving very quickly. But I thank you, Catherine, for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thank you. I think really, from our perspective, really interesting work, and thank you so much for sharing. So I'd like to pass the baton over to our last presenters, Angie and Laura, who will talk about their work in Maryland. Take it away.
Hi, my name is Angie de Guzman, and I am a professional learning specialist at the Maryland State Department of Education. Prior to that, I worked in Baltimore County as an elementary school teacher. And we have Laura with us. Laura, do you want to speak? Introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Laura Liccioni. I'm a professional learning specialist as well in Maryland. And prior to that, joining MSDE, I taught elementary and middle school for 16 years and had lots of other positions such as department chair, instructional coach, professional development, and performance coach. Did a lot of instructional coaching during that time. Thank you.
So our project, the Maryland Collaborative for Peer Coaching, began with the idea that teachers learning from each other not only empowers them, but also creates a culture of growth in schools. The Peer Coaching Collaborative began as a Teach to Lead project that occurred in Baltimore in 2016. And the problem of practice that was brought during that Teach to Lead idea was the idea that there were many supports for teachers and districts when implementing lots of district initiatives like formative assessment or the college and career ready standards, but refining those initiatives can be challenging. So because teachers may not receive feedback, support, or the time they need to shift to the college and career ready standards-based teaching practices. So it was thought that instead of looking at traditional professional development and bringing teachers together for workshops, it would be better to actually create a system of peer coaching within schools. Next slide. So to begin the process, we had an application for schools all across Maryland to apply to be part of the pilot. The pilot would include 3 days of training, substitute funding, so that they could actually go in the process, go in each other's classrooms for peer coaching. When school teams applied, they had to apply with an idea in mind of something they wanted to improve based on these pathways. The 5 pathways were determined by the Teach the Lead team with the idea that schools are already working on their own initiatives and that peer coaching should be a way to help refine them. So the 5 pathways were formative assessment, student learning objectives, school improvement goal plans, new teacher mentoring, which was not for first and second year teachers because we have a great system in place for those in Maryland, but really for third and fourth year teachers when mentors aren't necessarily part of their learning process for the school year, peer coaching could step in to help develop those teachers. And finally, the final pathway is National Board Certified for teachers that wanted to really look at becoming nationally board. By being selected for this pilot, teams would receive 3 days of training on building a collaborative culture. In addition, they'd be eligible for books and other resources, including sub-funding, to implement the process. Next slide. So a little bit more background on the initiative. As I mentioned, it began with a team that went to Teach the Lead, and that team included representation from MSDE, district educators, and classroom teachers. And when this was presented across the state, the idea was not it was a mandate from the state, but built with teachers to help grow teachers. And our goal is that while we're supporting heavily beginning during this pilot process and in the next couple years, that really it would become a sustainable model within each building that would be part of their natural culture. And the timeline for this is we launched the pilot last summer, and throughout this year we've implemented several supports and trainings and webinars to help support our teams, and then by this summer we hope to have the foundation built and resources for other schools to pick up next year, and we'll start the process again with new schools. Next slide. So starting off on the right track. As I mentioned, there had to be an application for our teams. However, when the teams applied, there were several requirements. First, the school teams include an administrator, a lead learner, and 1 to 3 classroom teachers from the school. The lead learner was essential for this process because they would be the support to ensure the initiative is implemented throughout the school year. They would be the teacher in the building to help build a structure for peer coaching and move forward with implementation. In addition, the lead learner would ensure that the peer observations remain non-evaluative. So those lead learners are the ones that are really responsible for ensuring that the pilot is being implemented. In addition to having that team, schools that applied had to provide us with climate data and other data aspects based on the pathway they chose in order to show that they already had a solid foundation to work from, knowing that when building a collaborative culture, if there is not already some supports there and some understanding of collaboration among peers, that it would not be able to go anywhere. So we wanted to ensure that each school had some foundation so that peer coaching would help solve problems, not create additional new ones. So let's look at our teams.
Like Angie had indicated, our peer coaching collaborative model really does reinforce a teachers as leaders culture. It underscores the support that we're offering to the teachers in each of the schools. through data dialogues after they've conducted walkthroughs with each other in each other's classrooms. We are pleased to note at this time that there's about 84% participation. That means we started off with 19 schools earlier in the year, and 16 of those schools are participating regularly. The 16 schools altogether have about 95 participants that participate in webinars, face-to-face training, setting up the communities of practice, the Schoology, which is, I'll talk about that in a minute, but that's the learning management system, and also support visits that MSDE staff go out to each of the schools to help them with whatever pathway they're currently working on. All of the activities are designed with building a cohort in which other educators can learn from whatever is happening, such as SLOs or school improvement or formative assessment. Next slide. Thank you. As I mentioned a minute ago, we use a Schoology, which you can see in the screenshot there. It looks a lot like Edmodo or Blackboard. The teams are able to post their tools and the resources and ask and answer questions, in a sense engaging in a virtual community of practice. It supports many of the teacher leader model standards like Domain 3, where they can collaborate using technology. One of the other things that we put in terms of structures to help the teachers in their peer coaching are webinars. Some of the schools, even though Maryland's a relatively small state, they're a couple hours away. So the webinars have really helped us have virtual PDs and discussions and collaboration among all of the participants, no matter if they're working on the school improvement pathway or the formative assessment or any of the other pathways. Recently, we had a webinar in which we had 2 schools show what they had been working on to all the other schools. Again, about 16 schools participated with about 95 participants listening to what the schools have done. One school called Pocomoke Elementary School had created a presentation called A Community of Learners Where Teachers Support Teachers. And they talked about their cycle of peer coaching and how they were supporting each other's goals, such as formative assessment during instruction. They made their changes in their instruction, and they already observed improvement in their learning from their students. So the cycle that they're talking about, which Angie mentioned, is occurring over the school year, in which they have a pre-observation where they sit down and talk to each other about the goals they want, then they do the observations in the classrooms, and then they sit down afterward and have the feedback about what they saw and what they can improve upon. Next slide. This is the most exciting part for Angie and I, the site visits. What that really means, we actually call them support visits with our schools, site visits through the grant. And what that really looks like is where we go out to each of the schools and we sit down with them in whatever capacity they want, whether it's during a planning meeting, if it's a walkthrough, if it's just a small group meeting, and we listen to where they are in the process. Recently I went out to a middle school who is on the National Board Certification pathway, and what she was struggling with, the lead learner was struggling with, was after she goes and conducts the walkthroughs in each of those 5 candidates that are training to be nationally board certified, she's done several videos and she wasn't sure exactly how to pull off the data. So Angie and I sat down with her and helped her determine how to make that into qualitative data and then quantify it so she can go back and have the conferences with those teachers. So that it's not her just saying you did a lot of talking or there were a lot of students off task. She's able to put that into numbers and help the teacher make sense out of it. Resources are also another support structure that we put in place besides the site visits that we participate in often. It can look like books that we purchase with the grant money or memberships to establishments like Learning Forward, whatever the schools say they need. One elementary school asked for a book called Number Talks. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with that. It's usually at the elementary school level, but increasingly it's been put into middle schools too. It's a way to emphasize student discourse with math concepts instead of the often used drill and kill. I mention this because what we did is we purchased the book, and then since we have elementary math resource people right at MSDE, we can take those resources to the schools along with helping them with the book studies. So the resources can take many different shapes. Next slide.
So as we're moving forward and we're looking at what we're going to do next, one of our main takeaways and our goals for this project is for it to be sustainable without MSDE. So right now we are providing a lot of support to the schools and including funding for substitutes. What we'd like to see happen is cohorts 1 and 2 from this year who have had growth, so not necessarily maybe the most success, but have shown growth based on their implementation of peer coaching, to come back and help us develop the training for the summer for cohort 3 and really be the mentors for the next schools. So those lead learners that we spoke of earlier would come around and help the next set of schools develop peer coaching models in their schools. So that is our goal, and that's what we would like to see with cohort 3. Several of the lessons we've learned is we may adjust some of those pathways to open them up and add additional pathways for schools that are not aligned. We want to have more focus on the data-driven decision-making, and we also want to help schools earlier in the process. We only started support visits this spring. Next year, with the inclusion of lead learners from cohorts 1 and 2 schools, we'd like to actually start support visits in the fall if possible. But we are really seeing great results, as Laura mentioned, from schools that have gone through the process this year. Those lead learners are really supporting teachers and each other through the peer coaching cycle. Next slide. And that is our contact information. We do have a website that that has more information about each school and how they are developing peer coaching. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And thank you for allowing us to share this project with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is Catherine Jacques again. I want to just say thank you to all of our presenters. I think it's just really interesting work, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from all of your successes and all of your great thinking. We have just a couple of minutes left, and so I want to share some questions with our presenters. So this first question is for Liz Barkowski, wondering if there's a certain type of readiness factor that really stands out for either teachers interested in being teacher leaders or states and districts that want to support these efforts. Is there something that seems to be really critical in those readiness factors for supporting teacher leadership?
I can speak to the school or district factor. I can't think of a specific teacher one that pops to mind this time, but I think really having strong support structures for teacher leaders, with the understanding that teacher leaders will come into a leadership role with knowledge and skills and perhaps even some prior leadership experience. But I think there are a lot of things, specifically adult learning or how to work with adults or teach adult learners, that is really critical for the teacher leaders themselves in terms of skills to develop and grow in a leadership role, and then having the support, training, professional development to help teacher leaders learn how to lead, not only with regards to adult learning, but Christian and his group had talked a lot about the different training that teachers in Denver had received. So I think really having those structures in place to provide the needed training and support, as well as having supportive school leaders to serve as thought partners and helping teachers succeed in that role, being considered leaders at their school and part of the school leadership team. So yeah, I definitely say those supports for professional learning and supports to help teachers be successful.
Great. Thanks, Liz. A similar question, and Christian, I'm wondering if maybe you or maybe Leslie or Whitney, if you would like to speak to this as well. Now, what are some really good tips or strategies for helping to build that culture of trust? You know, maybe for schools that are trying to implement teacher leadership, are there some ways that you've been able to really promote those trusting relationships or the willingness to share openly with each other as you're learning about this work?
Hi, everybody. We would probably begin our thinking in terms of before the model is even launched. We talked about our year zero and the importance of the design process involving teachers who are already in the school. And even parents in the community. We have a site-based decision-making council, and they were involved in helping think about the launch of the model, the design of the model, the way it would look, the way it would feel, and the budgetary decisions that came along with bringing our vision into reality. So I think it's really important that in the design process you involve your community and your teachers, particularly teachers who have been a part of the community for many years. To help think about what this would look like and feel like. Whitney and Leslie?
So for teacher-to-teacher leader building of trust, the first thing that has to happen is the administrator has to facilitate a time for the teams to get together and culture build. So one of the things that Dr. Sawyer had me do as a teacher leader, and one of the things I encouraged Leslie to do as a teacher leader, was to create an agenda of strategic norming for her group, introducing myself, telling them who I am, showing them a picture of my family, but then also having a discussion about what my philosophy is as it relates to educating children. So in that, just a basic transparency that helps to build trust with the teachers that you have to lead. What about you, Leslie?
I think one of the most important things is the relationship that the teacher leaders have with the school leaders. I can't tell you how important it is to me to know that whatever is happening with my teachers, any problems I may have, I can always sit down with Whitney or with Christian. I can discuss it with them and have a very meaningful conversation and get tremendous support. And it's not, again, somebody telling me what to do, but a discussion where we discuss the best ideas and how to best handle a situation. I think that relationship is critical.
I think finally what helps to build trust is consistency in what the teacher leaders say and what the school leaders say. So in order to get teacher buy-in, we have to be consistent in the messaging that we have. And so when Leslie wanted to start the school-wide initiative of National History Day, what she said, we said, and what we said, she said, and that helped the teachers trust that we were on the same page in terms of social studies education in our building.
I might also add the power of results. So for example, on Leslie's team, one of her teachers, we have seen dramatic improvements in her relationships with her students and student learning outcomes. And so really it's a lot of street cred, if you will, when we all see the impact this is having on helping teachers feel more successful and helping students learn faster. Everybody sees that this really works. So it's not about evaluation of teachers, it's about support of teachers in their work with students. And when the equation works, everyone realizes this is right for kids.
Great. I think we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to try to sneak in one more question. I think maybe Amy and Angie and Laura, if any of you want to take this, Amy, maybe we'll ask you first, is as you've been leading teacher leadership work, are there any surprises or ahas that you've seen leaders have around this work in understanding the power of teacher leadership?
Surprises? I think just the complexity of it all. I think especially because we've had teachers, principals, and district administrators all around the table at the same time talking about what leadership looks like. It was nice to hear we were more on the same page than different, but that everybody looks at it from a different point of view on how it's going to impact students. And I think that was actually a good surprise, just to see the differing points of view come together and really, even though it was talked about differently, still coming together with the same level of importance on how much it can affect the school climate and culture of your building.
Great. Angie and Laura, did you want to add anything to that?
I think one of the things that we found surprising is, while our goal is to have the schools develop their own process for peer coaching, and we really wanted them to be independent, that some of the schools really need a lot more support than we thought. So while we want them to do their own and grow their own culture, we needed to provide more support, I guess, than we thought initially, which is great because that's what we're there for. But it was definitely something that we had to step back and look at from what we're doing through the process. Laura, do you have anything else to add?
No, actually, that's exactly what I was thinking, which is why we're trying to move those support visits to earlier in the school year.
Great. Well, I think we are at time, so I want to say thank you so much to all of our presenters. It's inspiring work and I think really important work, so thank you for sharing with us. And thank you to everybody who joined us today for the webinar. I'm going to put up my contact information. If you have any questions or are just interested in teacher leadership in general, please feel free to reach out. And we will be sharing these slides as well as the recording with everybody who's registered. So if you're interested in sharing this with colleagues or looking back at information, please do. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.